Hey there, welcome to Papercraft Panda. In today's guided tutorial, I'm going to show you how to make a French Link Stitch journal. This tutorial will use the materials included in my complete book materials kit. You can find it on my Etsy store. Your materials kit has everything pre-cut. It includes 32 sheets of Mohawk superfine paper, 2 linen laid end sheets, 2 pieces of high-quality double-sided design cardstock, you get to choose the pattern, 1 pre-measured hole punch template, 72 inches or 6 feet of waxed linen thread, a craft glue stick, and 1 curved bookbinding needle. There's also a few tools that I recommend you have at home. A 12-inch ruler is always handy, though you should not need it for this project. Scissors, a pencil, an awl or a thick, sharp needle. I like to affix the needle to a piece of cork, if you have it. A bone folder, or you can use your fingertips. Heavy books or something similar that's flat that you can use for a book press. Scrap paper for gluing, and then optional, if you're going to use liquid PVA, a paste brush, or you can use your fingertips to spread that PVA is always helpful. When you open up your kit, you're going to have thread and a needle, just like this, and we're going to use the thread and needle later, so for now, go ahead and wrap those two up and set them aside. You've got 2 sheets of design cardstock. The pattern is different on each side, so you can choose what will be the outside and what will be the inside. The 2 linen laid sheets have a nice texture to those. Go ahead and set those aside as well. And let's start out by separating these 32 sheets of Mohawk Superfine. I like to fold back like this to give my thumb some purchase, count out 4 sheets, and make a stack. The next 4 sheets I'm actually going to lay perpendicular to the first set. That way it's easier to pick up those signatures later. It's a pretty straightforward step, so I'll go ahead and speed this up for us. Now that we've got our paper separated into stacks of 4, we're going to go ahead and fold our signatures. To do this, you're going to take all 4 sheets at once, fold them all over just like this, line up that front edge, especially the top or bottom corners. Then you're going to press on the bottom right with your thumb and smooth up. Using a bone folder, go over one slightly and then set that sheet aside. Let's do it together just one more time. You've got all 4 sheets in a stack, fold it all over at once, line up those edges. I like to use my fingertip to get them as close as I can, smooth from the bottom right up, and then once over with a bone folder. Of course, if you're left-handed, this would be opposite for you. Go ahead and finish folding the rest of your stacks. I'll kick on a little bit of music and speed it up a bit for you. Once you're all finished folding your signatures, go ahead and create a stack. I like to go over them once with my thumb like this, then separate that stack into 2 sets of 4. Once it's separated, turn one the opposite direction, and then we want to put them under some weight. For the weight, I have these little blocks. They weigh about half a pound. I also have a little bean bag. It weighs about half a pound. Either will work. I prefer to use a little kind of cutting board like this. Place the weight on top and let it sit for 10 to 25 minutes. While those press, we're going to fold our covers and our end sheets. Your end sheets are these ivory colored sheets of paper with the texture on them. We're going to fold them individually using the same method we did before. So we're going to fold over, let those corners meet, press on the bottom right with your thumb and smooth it up, and then once with a bone folder. Set that aside and let's repeat that process with the second one. So we'll fold it over, try to get those edges to meet as best as you can. Nothing is ever 100% 90 degree. Then go ahead and press and smooth, and we're done with that step. Now let's pick up our cover stock sheets with the pattern on it. These sheets are designed so you've got a pattern on each side to choose from, and I need you to pick which one should be the outside of the book and which one will be the inside. For me, I like to have these on the inside with the peaches on the outside of the book. So what I'm going to do is fold it with that in mind. We want the blue on the inside, so we fold it so it's on the inside. Let those corners meet, press down with the thumb, smooth up, and then once with a bone folder. We'll repeat that process with this one. And you can really have any of these. You could even switch them up if you want to. I like the way that this one looks with the peaches on the outside, so I'm just going to keep it this way, but you have a choice. You can do it any way you want to. Now what I like to do is just create 2 stacks out of these. I take one of the ivory sheets and one of the covers. Decisions, decisions. There we go. Sandwich them together like this. And then we're going to place that under weight for 10 to 25 minutes. And you can see I've got 2 of these little cutting boards. They're from IKEA. They're bamboo. Best $5 I ever invested. You can use something like that or just a heavy book. As long as it's flat and can apply uniform pressure, you're gold. Now we definitely want to press them for 10 to 25 minutes. If you can go for a few hours or overnight, even better. Once they're done pressing, we'll go ahead and remove the boards and the weight. Return the signatures so that all of the spines are facing the same direction. Now I did choose to press mine for 24 hours, so they're nice and flat and even, and that helps during the sewing process. Let's go ahead and get our cover sheets and our laid linen sheets out from under the press as well. We're going to separate these into 2 stacks. One will be the front of the book and the other will be the back of the book. We'll need these in their 2 separate stacks for the next step, which is cover prep. During cover prep, we're going to actually glue our cover front and back cover to the front and back end sheet and front and back signatures. Don't worry, I'll walk you through this. Let's make sure that you have some scrap paper on hand for gluing, a bone folder which will get out the excess air and glue, and your glue stick. You can also use liquid PVA if that's what you prefer. Go ahead and pick up your book block. This is the front and this is the back. I want you to lay one linen end sheet. This is your front end sheet and this is your front cover. Then flip the book over, lay the back end sheet, and this is your back cover. All of the spines should be facing the same direction. Once you're ready, I want you to pick up the front cover, the first linen laid sheet, which is the ivory color, and the first signature, set them aside. Now move the rest of the book block out of the way so it doesn't get any glue on it. Just really quick, here's what we're going to do. We're going to glue this ivory sheet to the edge of the first signature, only along that spine, and then we're going to glue the cover to the ivory sheet in the same spot, just along the spine. In bookbinding, we call this tipping in. It really helps us create a firm hold at the front and the back of the book since those receive most of the handling. Now let's go ahead and grab our scrap sheet. This is mine. I had a lot of failed attempts while I was creating this lined paper for bookbinding, but it was all worth it. Slide your scrap sheet under the spine of your signature, like so. Grab your glue stick. And I want you to put about 3 millimeters of glue along the spine. Make sure that you have your ivory sheet ready because this glue dries pretty quickly. Begin at the center and move up, and then at the center and move down. Put a lot of glue on here. It's totally fine. It dries clear, so don't worry if it's a little messy. Then lay down the ivory sheet. Get it lined up with the spine so the spines match as much as possible, and then get the tail of the book, so the bottom or the top lined up as well. Smooth with your fingertips to get the excess air out. But then if you have a bone folder, definitely go over, start at the center and work your way to the top, and then center and work your way down. We want a nice tight seal between these sheets. Now in this first method, I'm actually going to press this piece alone by itself before I add the cover. So go ahead and place it under weight for about 10 to 15 minutes. When we get back, we're going to take the board off and the weight off. Check this out, make sure that it's nice and tight and dry, and then we are going to glue the cover just like we did the last 2 sheets. So start at the center, work your way to the top, and then center to the bottom with your glue stick, and liberal glue is totally fine. Then take the cover sheet, lay it on top, line up those spines, and then repeat the process as we did before. Smooth it first with your fingertips, get out all that excess glue, run your thumb along the spine in case there's a little bit more, and then use your bone folder to press again from the center up and the center down. Now that you're done pressing, it's time to put it back under weight, and I always recommend it stay for 10 to 25 minutes, but if you can leave it for an hour to 3 hours or more, even better. While that's pressing, we're going to go ahead and get started on the back of the book. Before doing so, I like to write a small F on the front so I don't forget what was the front and what was the back. It's a very light F in pencil, just like this, and it helps me remember once the book is completely deconstructed so I can bring it back together. Now flip the book over, grab the back cover, the back linen laid sheet, and the last signature. We're going to go ahead and glue that direction by repeating all of the other processes, but we're going to do it in one step. Let me show you. Slide your scrap paper underneath the spine of the signature just like we did before, but you're going to be facing the opposite direction now. Apply the glue from the center up and the center down. Liberally is totally fine, and remember it will dry clear, so don't worry if it looks messy. Now go ahead and get that ivory sheet on as quickly as possible. Line up those spines and give it a good firm press with your fingertips and follow with the bone folder. I mentioned that this is an all-in-one step, which means that we're not going to be pressing this one before we add the cover. We're just going to go straight to adding the cover. There are benefits to splitting it into 2 drying steps, but I think that the books operate just fine if we do it all in one step and we let it dry adequately. Now this cover stock, as with other cardstocks, can sometimes have a matte coating. It just helps reinforce and keep the color brilliant. That coating can also make it difficult to adhere, and so it's okay to add extra glue. Don't be afraid to be liberal with the glue. You can always wipe away the excess with your fingertips, just like I'm doing here. Now I'm going to take my scrap sheet, I'm going to turn it the other way, like inside out. That way the glue's on the inside, and then I will lay this down and press it under weight, again for 25 minutes, but if you can press it longer, that's awesome. Once everything is dry, it's time for us to assemble our signatures. Go ahead and take the weights off of our front and back cover. You can see mine is pretty flat and pretty dry. I let it dry overnight. That's usually what I do in the Pacific Northwest. There's just more humidity in the air. Now take the book block, and I happen to know that because of the direction the spines are facing, this one is actually the back cover. This goes on the back, just like this. Then I flip the book over, and it's time to add our front cover. So I'll remove the weight from my front cover. Make sure that it's good and dry. And it is, and so we're just going to lay it on top like this. All of the spines should be facing the same direction, so take a quick peek, make sure that it is, and it's time for us to prepare for sewing. The first thing we need to do is pierce our signatures. To do this, I want you to make sure you know which side of your book is the top. It should be where you wrote the F on the first signature. Now set the block aside, grab the first signature, and open it up on the inside of the signature, not the cover. So I'm going to dig through here, there we go. Take your template and line it up with the top or the head of the book. At this moment, I realized I did not trim my template short enough, so bloop, there we go. Miracle of modern video. Now follow the little black line and puncture through all 4 sheets of paper using your awl, just making a mark at that location. Then remove the template and use your awl to go through the hole to the other side, and you want it to come out about 1 to 2 millimeters. So you should be able to see just the tip of your awl on the other side, and repeat the process for each of the holes that you made. When you're all done, I want you to turn this over, set it away from you. And you're going to repeat that process with every single signature so that you don't accidentally get them out of order. Another way to do this is to line up the template and then do your puncture and pierce all at once. So you would line it up like this and just push it through. Line it up, push it through. There are benefits to both. However, I find that I get my template less screwed up. It doesn't slip around on me if I just do the points and then pierce fully through later. You do whatever works best for you. I'm going to go ahead and speed this up, but feel free to pause or go back if you need to keep up with me. Once you've had a chance to admire your handiwork, don't get too excited. We have one more step. We're going to pierce the front and back covers. This is the actual cover stock itself that we're going to pierce through. Go ahead and take your first signature and open to the inside of the design cardstock. Line up your template like we did before. We're going to repeat the same process, but the reason why I call this out separately is because the force required to go through a single sheet of cardstock is very different than the force to go through 4 sheets of paper. I want you to take it easy with this and be careful. These front and back covers are very visible, and so the holes themselves should be dainty, is the word an instructor used with me once. I think it's the right word. We don't want them to be too big. We want them to be large enough for our needle to pass through, but we also want them to be neat and tidy. I'll go ahead and repeat the process with the back cover, speed things up a little bit, but as always, feel free to pause and go back if you need to. The next step in our sewing process is to thread the needle. If you hear a little hum in the background, that's just my printer. Okay, to get started, grab your thread and the needle that came with your kit. Go ahead and unwind the thread. We want the thread to be nice and long, no knots, so I like to go over it from the bottom to the top with my fingertips like this. It kind of warms up the wax a little bit too and makes it more malleable. Now we have to pass the thread through the eye of this needle, but the thread is a little thick. So what I like to do is I like to take my awl and flatten just the tip of the thread so that there's about 1 to 2 millimeters that are flat like this. You can use your thumbnail if you don't have an awl or anything that you have around the house. Now it should easily pass through, of course I say that and then miss. You should easily pass through the eye. And you want to pull the thread until there's enough where you can just poke through the center of the thread itself, like this. Now move the poked thread down the needle until it gets to the eye, and then just work it down to the eye with your fingertips. I like to use my thumb and forefinger to just pinch and pull it over the eye of the needle like that. Now you're all done, and we are ready to sew. Since we're going to sew from the back of the book to the front, we want to set the signatures up on the table so that it's easy for us to add them and keep them in the correct order as we go along. To do this, a little trick, really easy, have the book out in front of you with all spines facing you. That one right there is the front or top signature, so the top of the book is facing up. Pick up all of the signatures except the last one, leave it on the table, stand them up like this, and fold them away from you. This leaves us with the last signature, which is the one we're going to start with today. Go ahead and pick up your needle, move it into the last sewing station at the tail or bottom end of the book. This is the cover cardstock piece that we're moving into, not the signature itself. Pull the thread through until there's about a 2 to 3 inch tail that's left outside the book. This is some excess thread that we're going to use to tie a knot later. As you get the tail in place, bend it like this, just to force it in that one direction. That helps it hold and stay in place a little bit better. Then take your needle and move it through the next sewing station up from the inside to the outside of the book. Pull the thread through. You're going to notice that there's quite a bit of thread right now. It can get knotted and messed up kind of like this. And if you're not careful, it can also get itself caught on a corner like that. So definitely take your time, go real slow, and be careful not to pull the tail through. I give it a tug there just to make sure that it's a little bit tighter as we go. And then we're going to move the needle back into the book through the next sewing station up. Once you've got the thread inside the book, grip one end of the thread with one hand and the other on the tail and give a little tug to tighten down that stitch. Now go ahead and move from the inside to the outside of the book through the next sewing station up. And I've increased the speed on this a little bit, just so that we can move through here faster, but feel free to pause or back this up if you want to go back and see anything one more time. Once you reach this position, go ahead and tug on the tail and the thread one more time just to get that stitch nice and tight. And then we're going to move from the inside to the outside of the book through the top sewing station. Once you're completely outside the book and all of the thread is in place, go ahead and give it a little tug, and then we're going to take the needle and move into the main signature itself, via the sewing station that is directly above the one we just exited the book from. Now you can see that the hole that I had pierced wasn't wide enough for the needle to get into, so I had to go in, re-pierce, and then move the needle. That's fine. Sometimes I do that all the way through the book. Now we're going to take the needle and move it outside the book through the next sewing station. And this is where we're going to start making that characteristic French link stitch pattern. So I'm going to go ahead and move all of the thread to the outside of the book. Now take the needle and feed it behind the thread directly below, just like this. Pull the needle and the thread through and try to keep that long string of thread as close to the sewing station right there as possible. Now grab your needle and go into the next sewing station up. Once you're inside, give a little tug. That'll tighten up the X pattern. Then move outside the book through the next sewing station. Once you have all the thread outside the book, it's time for us to go ahead and make the second X. Move the needle behind the thread, just below as you did previously. And once you pull that thread through, make sure the long piece is sitting as close to the sewing station as possible. Now move your needle back into the book through the next sewing station up. And you're going to pull that thread all the way through. Don't get it caught on the table like me. Give the thread a little tug to tighten up that center stitch. And then it's time for us to move from the inside to the outside via the last sewing station at the bottom. Once you've got the thread entirely outside, it's time for us to make that knot that I was talking about. Go ahead and take the long piece and the short one, tie them together in just a simple knot. Get it nice and tight, and then I like to tie a second knot just for good measure. You don't have to, but it's something I like to do. And now take your needle, go back through the same sewing station, but be careful. You don't want to accidentally stab through the waxed thread itself. Now we're going to pull the knot to the inside of the book, and to do this, you pull the thread all the way through, then push down with your forefinger on the paper to give it support, while your other hand moves and wiggles that knot up through the sewing station itself. I like to tug on the tail a little bit and the long thread just to kind of pull it through and get it in position, and then I move the needle from the inside to the outside of the book again through the same sewing station. Once again, careful not to accidentally stab through the wax thread, and it will be a little harder this time. Actually kind of have to move the needle in very purposefully. And then this is sped up, but I am taking my time. I don't want to accidentally make this sewing station any larger than it needs to be. I tug on the tail just to get things back where they need to be. And then once outside, it's time to trim away the excess. We're going to do that with a scissor, and then we're ready to add our next signature. When adding each additional signature, pick them up off the pile, turn them toward you, and lay them down. Just like that. Now we're ready to go ahead and start sewing. Take your needle and move it through the last sewing station at the bottom of the signature. And just make sure that you support the signature when you're pulling the needle to the inside so that you don't over-widen the sewing station. Now go ahead and take your needle, move it from the inside to the outside of the book through the next sewing station up. Be careful, of course, when pulling the thread through. It still has a tendency to get stuck on things. And now we're going to go ahead and make our next French link stitch by moving the needle behind the thread directly below, just as we did before. It's just one piece of thread, not both of them. Make sure that the long piece stays as close to the sewing station as possible. Then with your needle, go back into the signature through the next sewing station up. Once you're inside, give the long bit a tug just to tighten up that previous stitch. There you go. And remember not to pull too hard. Now go from the inside to the outside again, through the next sewing station up. And go ahead and make your next French link stitch. Once again, behind the thread directly below, keeping the long piece as close to the sewing station as possible. And now we're going to re-enter the signature through the next sewing station up. As we've done before, go ahead and tug on the long thread to tighten that center stitch. And we're going to create our kettle stitch next. The kettle stitch is very important in bookbinding. It secures each signature to the one before it and gives stability to the spine. So to start this kettle stitch, we want to move from the inside to the outside of the signature through the top sewing station, just like this. Once you've moved the thread to the outside of the book, give it a tug to tighten up that X pattern. Notice how it tightens on the spine just like that. Then you want to take your needle and move it behind the thread, securing the previous two signatures together. For us, it's this little piece of thread right here. Use caution when you slide it behind. You don't want to separate the two. They are glued together, but your needle will fit behind this thread perfectly. Take your time and go nice and slow. Pull it through until a small loop remains, just like this. Then take your needle, move it up through the loop. And now before you tighten that loop down to a knot, set the signatures on the table, get them well aligned at the top, the bottom, and in the front, just like this. Now once you have those signatures where you want them to be, press your thumb down over the kettle stitch to hold it in place, pull up with your other hand, and tighten the knot. We'll be adding a kettle stitch now at the end of every single signature edition. So let's go ahead and add our third signature on top. I'm going to speed things up because we're going to do this exactly the way we did the second signature. I'll be jumping in at the end of this signature so that I can show you one more time how to create that kettle stitch. Okay, now that we are at the end of the signature, it's time for us to tie that kettle stitch. Go ahead and pull your thread all the way out, lift up the book, and then I want to show you move the needle behind the thread holding the previous two signatures together, just like this. Pull that thread until there's a small loop. Then get the book down on the table, get everything lined up the way you want it. Make sure that you move the needle through the loop. Then press down above the kettle stitch with one of your fingers and tie that knot with your other hand. Now you can add your next signature and keep on going. Just don't forget, when you get to the end of this signature, which will now be on the left, it's going to be another kettle stitch that you'll need to tie. And once you add the next signature and move to the right, you'll need to tie a kettle stitch there too. I'll go ahead and increase the speed on this so that it doesn't take forever. But if you have any questions or you need to stop and go back and look at something again, please feel free. I'll be back when we reach the last signature of the book to walk you through all of those final steps. Now it's time for us to sew that 8th and final signature. Before we start, we're going to go ahead and just finish the kettle stitch on the 7th signature here on the right side. And then we're going to add the last signature on top. And the last signature is kind of like the first one that we sewed, except we're going to do it a little bit in reverse. So instead of going into the cardstock first, we're going to go into the signature first, just like this. Once we're inside the signature, we're going to repeat the exact same process that we've been doing all the way through the kettle stitch on the left. So I'm going to go ahead and speed this up so you can work through it on your side, and then I will come back when it's time for us to go into the cardstock itself. Okay, now that we've tied that kettle stitch, we're going to return the needle into the cardstock piece itself. Remember to go slow with this. Take your time and make sure that you're supporting the inside of the cardstock as you're pulling the needle and thread through. We've been going into 4 sheets up until this point, and so once we go back to the cardstock, it can be really easy for us to accidentally pull too hard and rip or tear the paper, and so I just want you to go slowly, use caution, take your time. Now that we reach the end of the book, we're going to tie our final kettle stitch. Go ahead and loop that needle behind the thread holding the previous 2 signatures together, just as we've done before. Make sure that you're holding those signatures in place as you tie the kettle stitch, and then this time return the needle into the cardstock itself via the same sewing station. Once you're inside the cardstock, give it a little tug to tie down that stitch, and then I want you to move the needle behind that thread previous, create a little loop. Now wrap your needle around and through the loop, pull away from you to create that knot, and then use your scissor to trim away any excess thread. You can leave a longer tail that will go behind the thread previous, or a little one like I do. Now it's time for us to admire your new book. After your book is complete, it's always a good idea to put it under some weight for at least 24 hours. This is going to help get any of the air out of those signatures that we added in when we were sewing. Now let's take a peek inside the book. We've got this beautiful linen laid paper that welcomes you. And then this is where your writing would start. If you have blank pages, this is where your art may begin. Of course, we can see all of these really pretty exposed stitches on the inside, and the book will lay completely flat on any page. It's really handy if you're an artist or you just like to write on a flat surface. As we move through the rest of the book, we have more beautiful exposed stitching, of course, and at the end, we're going to see a repeat of the beginning. You've got this beautiful linen sheet for your outro, and then, of course, you've got the double design cardstock, which wraps it up just beautifully. I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial and the kit itself. If you have any questions or feedback, please feel free to reach out to me. You can get in touch with me at hello@papercraftpanda.com. Thank you so much for your support, and I'll see you in the next video.